Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. I am your host, Chad. Joining me, as always, is Marcus, the Glorious One. We are doing things a little bit different this week. We've been off for a few weeks. We unfortunately missed our Halloween show. We've been having issues with live recording, broadcasting directly to Twitch, and then uploading to YouTube. So this week, it's all pre recorded. Same time we're recording it because we're creatures of habit, but also we're doing it a little different. Um, This week, we're finally tackling the 2015 World Title Series, 10 years later. And I know, Marcus, this is one of those times in wrestling where a lot of people gave up on the show, and rightfully so. So, Marcus, first of all, how you doing?
Good man. Been talking about this one for a minute, kind of reminiscing and thinking back to it. I think I said we brought this up talking about something else on one of the other shows that this was like COVID wrestling before it was a thing.
And that's
It
apropos.
felt that way.
You know,
Yeah.
that's absolutely apropos. This was a time in wrestling when things, especially AEW was what 4 years from because they launched in what 2019 fully. I want to say All In was 2018. They
Yeah.
launched, this was 3 or 4 years before AEW. The WWE was in the throes of arguably their worst era ever, although now is making a run for it. And TNA was out of money. But it was also the time I think when New Japan started to really pick up, right? Because 2017, we would see, or yeah, I think it was 2017, 2016. Chris Jericho would make the jump from WWE to New Japan and would face Kenny Omega. And that's kind of when New Japan started to get themselves going again in their next golden era. TNA, on the other hand, was devoid of money, was lacking talent, did not have direction, it did not have a sustainable television deal. And this was a time when, what were they on? Destination America, which did not help them. And it's important to note that even though by the time Spike TV and TNA ended their run, I still think they were pulling in 8 to 900,000 viewers a week. They were under the 1 million mark, but they were still probably Spike TV's most popular show, and they were kind of on board with keeping them around. But then they, as the story goes, they found out that Vince Russo, who they had executives who were not fans of Vince Russo, was working on the show in a quiet capacity. And because of that, they opted to not renew TNA's contract. Now, how much of that is real, how much of that is wrestling speculation and you know, what have you, I don't know. I don't know. That's the story. Because of the end of the contract, they ended up going to Destination America, a much smaller network. I don't even know if it's still in existence today. And they basically lost most of their budget. They lost most of their money. Advertisers pulled out. Things were not going well. The Hulk Hogan era, damaged the company, and we'll talk about that more in depth here because I feel like there's so much meat on that bone. Um, when all that happened, they were left kind of scrambling, and we talked about this briefly before when we talked about Slammiversary 2015 for the 10-year anniversary, where they were so hard up for money they had to tape all of the shows that they were going to do after Slammiversary before Slammiversary. So they had Kurt Angle lose the TNA World Title to EC3 on the live show, and or not on the live show, but on the tape show, and then went into Slammiversary with EC3 in a tag match with Tyrus taking on, I think it was like Mr. Anderson and Eric Young, maybe. I don't even remember. And so the whole Slammiversary vibe was off. Um, Things got a little bit better come Bound for Glory, but the Bound for Glory situation actually, I think came into what we're seeing with the World Title Series, if I remember correctly. So let's go back to Bound for Glory real quick because this kicks off everything. The event was held on October 4th. But what's funny is the events of this tournament already ended. It had already ended. Matt Hardy, EC3, and Drew Galloway took on one another in a triple threat match with Jeff Hardy as a special guest referee. Matt wins, and following the event, he gets stripped of the title. And so, you know, they come up with the Bound for Glory series, which again was already taped 3 months in advance to kind of explain why Matt Hardy loses this belt. It was in North Carolina. I don't know how many people maybe like 3,000 if we're lucky. 1,800. 1,800 people showed up. It wasn't a not a Skylar. It wasn't a great Bound for Glory. It was one of the good hands on TNA television a decade before it happened. Yeah, apparently. Okay. Good for John Skylar. Tigre Uno defeated Andrew Everett and DJZ and Manic in an Ultimate X match for the X Division title. Tyrus won a Bound for Glory gauntlet match because apparently they were trying to push Tyrus. The Wolves defeated Brian Myers and Trevor Lee in a TNA World Tag Team title match. This was a continuation of a feud that could have been so much better than it was, where Jeff Jarrett and his new group, the Global Force Wrestling organization, invaded actually right before the World Title Series was taped. And Myers and Lee beat the Wolves for the tag titles. The Wolves beat them back, and this was like the obligatory rematch. Bobby Roode defeated Bobby Lashley when he was just known as Lashley for some reason in a King of the Mountain match, or King of the Mountain Championship match. Gail Kim defeated Awesome Kong to retain the X Division title. Angle defeated Eric Young because this is when we were pushing Eric Young for some reason, a thing that still baffles me to this day. And then, of course, the main event. So, all in all, it wasn't a great show, but it did kind of herald what people should expect for the Bound for Glory series, which was going to essentially be a 2 month long programming block. And that's essentially what it was. You know, they ran through all their shows that they taped because they taped all these shows in July. Like they taped maybe 40 episodes. No, that's probably too many. Let's say for August, September, October, November, December. I can do some math. It's 4 times 5, 20. Probably 20 to 24 episodes worth of episodes of Impact they filmed in July. And when you think about that, like they taped the entire year's worth, Marcus. In July 28th of 2015, they taped the rest of the years instead of Impacts. And they ended up doing this thing where Josh Matthews and the Pope would bring the show in via green screen. They would have like a terrible graphic behind them, and they would kind of just talk like it was like a syndicated sports show from the 90s. And then they would throw to a match, maybe then throw to a promo. And it felt taped. It felt syndicated. It didn't feel like we were watching a live show. It didn't feel like we had the same type of energy that we got from other shows. Watching from what we were seeing before, especially when we were having live episodes of Impact, to watching shows that were 3 months old at a certain point, how do you feel like the show itself helped or hurt by moving to this extended taping format?
I mean, it was enjoyable in some spots because, like you said, I think because the whole concept of the world title series was basically a kind of like a nothing to do tournament that they kind of made into a makeshift uh thing to lead into Bound for Glory. So some matches felt important, and then other ones felt like okay, that was just random, and they like the hint to copy, cut, and paste so many different things that didn't fit to make stuff fit, including what you just said when it comes to the commentary, which is ironic because even with the way they had to do commentary, that still came off better than what it used to be. Felt like that was heavily criticized about Taz and Josh Matthews being in a closet. which they weren't in a closet, but it still came off better than back then because the way they used to shoot them is like, man, are they in a closet? Like the way they used to shoot them. But yeah, like I said, at times it worked, and then at times it was just like, okay, they clearly are robbing Peter to pay Paul right now, and if not for the talent that they did have at the time, just really being good, that's one thing that saved them over all these years of turbulence that we watched them. They've always had quality talent, even if they didn't have a large quantity of that quality talent. So, like you said, they still had, Lashley, McIntyre, the Hardy, Matt Hardy for what he was doing back then and other names. But yeah, it was just a lot of things playing at once that you kind of almost had to make yourself buy into what was being sold to you, even though you really didn't have no you really didn't have no desire to buy it. You kind of just had to go along with it because you knew like this is so awkward, but it's like they're making it work. It was Frankenstein. It was TNA Frankenstein
Hmm.
of Impact Frankenstein at the time, and they made it work. It was awkward, but they made it work.
I don't know if I agree that they made it work. I think one of the biggest issues I had with this was knowing that so much of this would become outdated because one of the things that sports and pro wrestling do in tandem is modernize themselves with current events. You'll always hear sports commentators when you watch wrestling live, when you watch sports live, talk about the goings on of the day. They drop, references and whatnot. And I didn't watch every single match from the Bound for Glory series, but there was like some like keeping up with the Kardashian references and stuff like that, and like other like E and MTV, because God, that was a time. Kind of those things like Snooki, Jersey Shore and all that. I think Ronnie or what one of them showed up in 2013, I think. But it felt like it was devoid of any of that then, you know? The 2015 World Title
Yeah,
Series and the other kind of storylines, which there wasn't really much of any. And that was another issue. It was devoid of that, and it made it feel like it was very isolated, is the best way I can describe it. And considering
yeah,
all the focus was on the World Title Series, it didn't really allow for anything else to be told during that time.
and you know what? You when you segue into that, that actually is the key component to it. The closer thing we got to the stories, because like you said, and that's why I felt so Frankenstein. The matches felt like one thing, the commentary felt like another thing, or the commentary was one thing, the matches felt like another thing, and then they do this, almost like how they used to do the talking smack
Yeah.
in SmackDown. They did that. So they used to do these round tables. It wasn't even like how they used to do our classic spin cycle. They used to so they'll have Matt Hardy sit down with Lashley and maybe somebody else, and they'll bring up the beef that they would have in the storyline and just talk up the upcoming matches that they'd have or the upcoming match that they have at Bound for Glory, and maybe reference the World Title Series, and we get something to have a match, but the match wasn't anything necessarily to go along with the beef that they were having in the segment we just watched. It was just a match that they had like a one off.
Hmm.
But the way that they played it, you think it was. That's why I say they kind of made it work. It didn't work all the way, but for what they absolutely needed it to do on the smallest of levels, they did it. But it did feel like three different things. But they, like I said, it was a copy cut and paste job. It was Frankenstein it is fine. It's with like you said, it felt like COVID before the COVID wrestling was a thing, and I didn't even I had actually forgot about the global force wrestling element that got brought in at the time because that felt like a real mini pocket of potentially something happening that almost happened and then it went away. So
We're going to talk about the global force of it all because I feel like there's so much there. One of the things that I think kind of contributed to this daffy kind of setup was that any promo that they seemed to want to cut, right, was done like quote unquote via satellite. It was clearly just like a guy talking on their cell phones or on their computer and having sent them in to someone. That was how Matt Hardy relinquished the world title. He was sitting on his couch or in a hotel room, recording him
Yeah,
quote unquote relinquishing the title. There was no pomp, no circumstances. There wasn't any. Excuse me. There wasn't any type of um, interaction with the live crowd or segments in front of everyone. It was all kept behind the scenes because I think they were sending them in as needed as they kind of cobbled this all together. So they did Frankenstein the hell out of these shows. And I don't know if because like I still think this is one of the worst eras of the company because one of the things you have to remember is you could do all this, right? You could cobble together 20 episodes across 3 or 4 months, right? You could do all that. The problem comes is you need to do it over the course of more than just 4 or 5 days because what ends up happening is you have guys wrestling 2 or 3 times a day. And listen, that's not the worst thing ever if you're just putting in a 4 minute squash. But when you're trying to actually sell that this is the world title series, you need to put in matches that have time 15, 16, 17, 18 minutes. And I don't think they ever hit that mark. I think most matches ended around the 10-minute mark. Sure, some will probably gone longer, some will have ended sooner, but give or take 2 minutes, that's what you were looking at. So none of the matches in this world title series ever stood out. And I think that's kind of again one of the big issues that this era faced was they could not deliver in the space that they were given because the wrestlers themselves, rightfully so, had to be protected. You couldn't have Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards go out there and wrestle a 35, 40-minute classic when they got two other matches they got to do that day. And I think the weights of the wrestling and the weight of the short time period I think was too much to bear, and I think that's why this time period, on top of the cobbled together shows, isn't remembered fondly because there's not a lot there to be fond of. What do you think? Do you think
yeah.
do you agree with that the match quality, while never truly bad, never really hit the apex that it should have or could have?
No, absolutely. And a lot of that, to your point, because it wasn't a straight up and down standard show, and because they could never really fully relate the tension that was being sold in one part to the match that we got, because even the way that it felt like the matches felt they were solid bouts, but it felt like age. Um, but it was current for who they just got through talking with. Like you said, that Frankenstein limit didn't help, and the fact, and I want to say that they used to, because during that time they had to upload the whole shows to YouTube, and I think they took them down. Uh, maybe because they put them on the service, or maybe they just because they didn't want to reference anymore, because it was just like that was just like the times when we kind of just had to do what we had to do on those shows we don't really want to remember. But yeah, it was just like I said, it was certain things that you had to look forward to in terms of, like you said, the old style tournament, and then like some of the entertainment part of it was those segments that they'd have them shoot. Like I said, the talking smack of it all. But I had even had it out of my mind because Matt Hardy was champ during that time. You were right; they did do the via satellite things where he was at home, and this wasn't thankfully not the cold blooded Matt Hardy where he had braids that one time. Thankfully. But he did win the title, and he was in at home, and he did have to relinquish it. That was insane. Like that was so it's a blur. But I would imagine. I almost wish we could get somebody an interview on to kind of reminisce over if that was that for that specific time, like what was going through their head. What all went into a day going through all that, and if they felt like they was ever gonna get away from that because of the constraints they was under at that time had to be crazy on top of the looming potential global force takeover. That had to be an insane time.
And it certainly was. 2016, I would say things got back to normal, at least to a degree. If I remember correctly, I think 2016 was when they did Bound for Glory in Canada, and where L.A. Knights was. No, no, it wasn't. That was 2017. 2016 still sucked. 2016 was Lashley versus EC3, Gail Kim versus Maria, the Broken Hardys versus Crazy Steve and Abyss. That was actually pretty dope. The Impact Grand Championship was debuted. Mike Bennett debuted in the company, so did Moose. DJZ won the X Division title. So like things weren't great in 2016, but we move into 2017. That's when things really started to get going. But before we got to 2017 and the LA Knight title win and OVE's debut and LAX's return, before things started to really get good again, we got the World Title Series, and we have to talk about the World Title Series. So basically, the World Title Series was a bracket of 8 different groups. You had the wild card group, which had Crazy Steve, Mahabali Shera, Jay Bradley, then known as Aiden O'Shea, Kenny King. Group UK, which featured Grado, depending on if you were Pope or not. Drew McIntyre, now, of course, Drew Galloway. Then known as Drew Galloway. Bram, the current Thom Latimer, former NWA World Champion, then at the time, former member of Ascension. Rockstar Spud. And honestly, Rockstar Spud and EC3 carried this time period. Group champions featuring world champions of Bobby Lashley, Austin Aries, Mr. Anderson, and EC3. Group knockouts, that's right. The idea was that 2 knockouts would enter into group play, so to speak, as part of the tournament. Awesome Kong, Gail Kim, Madison Rain, and Brooke Tessmacher. Then we also had a group Future 4, which was Micah, a.k.a. Tongaloa, the worst wrestler in existence. Jesse Goddard's Crimson, and L.A. Knight, then known as Eli Drake. We had the tag team specialists, which featured Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards, as well as Robbie E. and Matt Hardy. Group X division, which was Manic, TJP, Suicide, um, Sadistico. So many stupid ass gimmicks. Mark Andrews, known as Mandrews at the time, DJZ, now known as Joaquin Phoenix, and Tigre Uno, formerly Extreme Tiger. And then Group TNA Originals, which featured the team of Beer Money, James Storm and Bobby Roode, Eric Young, and of course Abyss. Now, one of the big issues with this is that there are 2 major names that, if you notice, weren't involved who were on the roster at the time: Kurt Angle and Jeff Hardy. Now, Kurt Angle was building up to, I believe, leaving the company come February, I think. His last matches, if I remember correctly, were in the UK, and I think involved Drew Galloway, Bobby Lashley, and Bobby Roode, I think were the names that he faced in his final matches with TNA. He was rehabbing, I think, his neck or his knee at the time, so he was out. Jeff Hardy had broken his leg, if I remember correctly. And he did it doing a jump with a dirt bike. And he landed wrong and broke his leg in 2. So he was on the mend, and he wouldn't actually come back, I think, until early 2016, I think, where he'd reunite with his brother. Only briefly, because then that would turn into, because 2016, unfortunately, because now I remember it all, was the broken Hardy of it all, where Matt Hardy would evolve into his broken persona for the first time. Jeff would return to wrestling. Matt would win the world title. Then he would become broken, and a whole thing. It was a whole thing. But not having those 2 names also hurt the product, because those were 2 of your biggest names. You had just lost the year before AJ Styles, Hulk Hogan, Sting, Bad Influence is gone. Christopher Daniels and Frank Kazarian. Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley are gone. You also just lost Nick Aldis, who left right around Slammiversary. He finished up with the company and joined up with the fledgling Global Force Wrestling. And then you lose all these names, and you're kind of stuck, rehabbing your roster. You bring in Drew Galloway alongside Eli Drake and Micah as as the Rising. We've You get the Wolves, you put them in a bigger spot in 2015. You start building up names like Lashley and EC3. There are guys on this roster that you can lean on at this point, but it's still not a great situation. So basically, the group play boils down to this: group champions, Marcus, EC3, Lashley, Austin Aries, and Mr. Anderson. Two men go on to the tournament, the other two go home, essentially. Each group has three matches. EC3 wins his group play, if you will, because I think there's points involved. For the points, I think it's like 2 points. Here we go. Each winner in the round robin matches were rewarded 3 points, and a draw was worth 1 point for each participant. Each match was 15 minutes long, no longer. That was the time limit. And the two top guys in each group advanced on this Sweet 16, essentially. So EC3 and Lashley win theirs. Aries, Anderson don't. First thing, this is the big group, right, Marcus? Do you think they made the right call going with EC3 and Lashley over Anderson and Aries, who Aries, by the by, would also be on his way out fairly soon? And I think Anderson would get fired early into 2016. Right call to go with EC3 and Lashley out of the biggest group that you got?
Yeah, but to me, because yeah, EC3 was this was gonna be what his first or his second go with world champion.
I think this would be a second because he won it after, well, before Slammiversary, and he held on to it until Bound for Glory when he finally lost it. I think Matt pinned Drew after Jeff got involved. And
Yeah,
then,
and this would be yeah.
yeah, this would be his second go around once he got his hands on the belt.
Okay, and this would be after it was like all belts Lashley, right? This was after that.
Before all belts, Lashley, I believe, was 2016.
Gotcha.
So
So I think that was the right time. Yeah, EC3 was like the heir apparent, and Lashley was building to being that dominant force that he'd eventually get into. Um, and like you said, I mean, and I don't know if they knew it at the time, but the other two were kind of on their way out. So yeah,
I think they knew Aries was on his way out. I don't think they knew that Anderson would kind of fall away the way he did. Group UK, Drew Galloway wins all three of his matches, while Bram loses to Rockstar Spud in one. Grado doesn't get any points. I think this is where we start to see some of the big glaring issues with this tournament. I know there's a lot of people who are high on Drew Galloway. I've been watching him since 2008 or 9. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get the hype around this dude. I think he's boring. I think he's dull. And while I think he was a decent asset at the time for TNA because he could do some matches, cut a couple decent promos, nothing about him stood out. But it also kind of hastened the issue with the division because Rockstar Spud was over. He was getting over with the crowd. And even though he had this great feud with EC3 the year prior, like throughout the prior year, especially building up to that whole first, what was it, first blood match or something like that, or an I Quit match. I feel like and this is going to be a bigger issue as we talk more about the brackets here, the round robin groups. They failed to make new stars. EC3, yes, but he was already a star heading into this tournament because of the way they booked him over the last year and a half. Because EC3 would be in the company for a year plus before he wins the world title. And he was pretty much the best thing about the summer of 2015. And I feel like TNA management tried to go with names that they thought would interest fans. as opposed to names that could help elevate the product, like Rockstar Splits could. So I unfortunately feel like this is going to be a running issue with these group plays. Now that takes us to the women. Awesome Kong and Gail Kim, which I think in this specific instance, Marcus, I don't know if you agree, they were the right picks because Gail Kim at the time was still at the tail end of her prime, and while Awesome Kong wasn't, she had the size and strength to be able to have a good match with the men. Do you feel like Brooke and Madison Rain should have been the ones to go over, or do you think Kong and Kim were the right picks?
Kong and Kim was just like it was their go to for the division that they could always bank on. Even that Kong's worst, Gail could get something out of her. Gail would always be top shape enough to make whatever they needed to do work at the time. So also like you saying, oh, you said Rain and Testmarker was on the other end of things.
Yes,
Yeah, Rain. I think we talked about this. Rain kind of outside of maybe having some more elevations or tweaks, if you will, with that character. He wasn't gonna necessarily elevate past anything she was already doing in the ring, and Brooke was still developing. But like I said, I think Kim and Gail was just kind of like had that fight forever vibe, so it was something you could always go back to and bank on. That the crowd at least was familiar with, it would always be invested in. So it was the right safe kind of it was the right kind of safe bet for them.
I agree. I agree. Brooke was great in a lot of ways, but I feel like she
Yeah.
wouldn't have had great matches with the women, with men. And I've never been a Madison Rain guy, and I've always thought that she was overrated and overhyped. So yeah, I think they made the right choice.
Mm.
Group wild card should have been kind of like their best opportunity to build young guys. I was always a fan of Aiden O'Shea when he was Jay Bradley. I don't know if you remember this, in 2012, they had this, or maybe it was 2011. Shane Douglas started Extreme Rising. It was supposed to be a new group. Matt Hardy famously suffered one of the worst concussions of his career on one of those shows. Um, it was bad, but it featured a lot of guys that I think had potential, and it launched right around the same time as House of Hardcore Tommy Dreamers group. And Jay Bradley was a big name with this Extreme Rising entity, and he had this great promo which I can't find anymore, where he's like, they call me Lonesome Jay Bradley, but calling me lonesome is like calling a fat kid tiny. It's ironic. And I was like, this guy's got potential. Then he shows up on Gut Check, gets signed. They do nothing with him because they're fucking idiots. And then he comes back because Billy Corgan's a fan of him. And they end up not doing anything with him again. And I'm just kind of stuck here going, why? But yet Mahabali gets 9 points, wins three straight matches because they really thought he was going to be something, and I don't understand why. Team TNA Originals, Bobby Roode and Eric Young advanced. Not the right choices. You should have gone with James Storm. We would have gotten you better matches, but they had to have another heel. Group Tag Team Specialists is kind of where I think things fell apart. Matt Hardy wins all three matches. I don't know if he's the wrong pick, but I do know that you should have had both Davey and Eddie in this tournament because I feel like when you're talking about matches, especially when you're filming a bunch of them in a row and you need them to have some type of oomph and pizzazz, you have your two best wrestlers be as involved as possible. And for some reason, Davey and Eddie were barely involved in this tournament. They had a good match, not great match, with one another where it ended in a tie. And Davey would then go on to face I forget who. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But they had Matt Hardy, be the top guy in the tournament, and all of his matches sucked because. And here's what I need everyone to know: Matt Hardy is physically a very broken man. And the way he moves now and the way he moved 10 years ago, not that different. Bow-legged, unathletic. He struggled. And TNA could have had Eddie and Davey come out of this group and go off because, like, here's the thing: you could have had Bobby Roode and James Storm in this group. You could have had Eric Young in this group. You could have had so many other guys in the tag team group. You didn't need to put Matt Hardy. If you really wanted Matt Hardy to win and go to the finals, you could have had this group be anything. And you could have Eddie and Davey wrestle as many times as possible because those two guys, especially against each other, let alone against the broader field, are interesting. They're fun. People care, and they put on good matches. And instead, we had to sit through Matt Hardy slogging it through. And this is again part of the issue with this tournament. They went with who can we market the most to wrestling fans, who still has name brand and name recognition, not who can we make have name brand recognition. Who has name brand recognition, and let's push them. Do you think, Marcus, that Matt Hardy should have been put in the position he was, considering, we know very well he is not a singles wrestler, and he wasn't 10 years ago. He was 40 at the time. He's 50 now. Knowing that he was 40, knowing that he's been through a lot physically, and knowing that, one-on-one matches, he's going to get exposed. Do you think Matt was the right pick considering his popularity, or should they have gone with Davey and Eddie?
I wonder if they would have gone with Davey and Eddie if if this wasn't a Frankenstein thing. Like I think I don't know because like you said, like once they got to the like what 2016, they were coming out of this particular storm. I don't know if at the time they weren't aware of exactly where they were headed or how things were going. That's why they packed so much into the can, if you will. So I don't know if they trusted themselves enough that they looked at it, you know, the wolves and be like, this is probably where we should be going, but we don't know if we even have the time, resources, or ability to commit to it because we're on such shaky ground right now. So let's go with what we know at least has, you know, marketability and something behind them already, and kind of just try to go into the singles route, which in a lot of ways, like you said, it feels, and this is not by much, but it feels like he's in a better condition now. But that's not, like you said, that's not saying a whole hell of a lot. But he was limited. It felt like he wasn't in as bad a shape as Kurt Angle was when he was kind of just limited to being at his worst with the whole knee and everything. But it felt like that's what he was doing. He was doing the not too similar to what he doing out of the twist, the fade, the side effect, the taunt, maybe a leg drop here or there, but it's not by much. It's kind of just I'm gonna pace out these maybe six moves here and there and make it look like I'm doing more than what I am. Instead of being explosive, anything like that, like the Wolves would have been. So I wonder if they just didn't trust themselves to go with something because they didn't have the resources to do anything with them.
Maybe. Um, they
Yeah.
they really didn't know what 2016 would look like. I know Anthem got involved sometime in 2016, but I don't remember exactly when Anthem bought TNA. I still think they should have gone with Davey and Eddie. In fact, I thought that's who they should have built the entire tournament around. But what are you gonna do? DJZ and Tigre Uno won group, or I should say, advance out of the Group X division with Mannix tying them all with 6 points, and Managers just getting three. And then finally, Group Future 4. They nailed both of these. Eli Drake and Jesse Goddard ended up winning or getting out of the group. Um, Eli Drake, obviously, LA Knight. A lot of people think he should be world champion today, and he should be. He's fantastic. And Jesse Goddard's actually had a pretty good look. He's, not a great wrestler, but he was never a bad wrestler. So I think they were the right picks. And that brought us to a tournament. EC3 would take on DJZ. Bram would take on Davey Richards. Lashley would take on Drew Galloway. Mahabali Share would take on Eli Drake. T. Gray would take on Gail Kim. Eric Young took on Kenny King. Jesse Goddard took on Awesome Kong. And Bobby Roode took on Matt Hardy. And this is where you can start to see where these matches, should have been longer than they were. Truly, but they weren't. EC3 defeats DJZ. Davey defeats Bram. You get EC3 and Davey in the next round. Lashley defeats Drew in barely an 11-minute match, while Mahabli squashes Eli Drake in a 3-minute match. This right here is part of the issue. What the ever loving fuck are we doing? Mahabli was at best a prospect in 2015. Now he's a never was. He had a little bit of hype going for him because in 2012, I think it was what it was, or 2011, one of those is right. TNA launched a Indian television show called Ring Ka King, King of the Ring. And they had Scott Steiner, Eugene, Nick Aldis, I think, was out there. Abyss, I think. But the one name that was supposed to be a big star was Mahabali Shera. He came from that show. TNA trained him up, and he became the ring kicking champion. Let's see if he's even credited for it. I think he was the last ring kicking champion. He's only 35 too, which is crazy. Yeah, the ring kicking champion. He defeated. I want to say it was like Nick Aldis or something like. He beat Brutus Magnus. Yeah, who beat Matt Morgan. Eh. So they tried to make him into something and it didn't work. And having him beat Eli Drake was a travesty. Eric Young and Tigre Uno beat Gail Kim and Kenny King respectively, while Goddard beats Awesome Kong and Matt Hardy beats Bobby Roode. Neither are the wrong move. And that sets up the second round, where again we start to see issues. I don't have an issue with EC3 winning or even going to the finals. I have an issue with him beating Davey Richards in what probably is the best match of the tournament as a whole, not just the single elimination, but the round robin stuff. But EC3 was already a world champion. We knew who he was and what he wasn't, and I feel like Davey, who had a big run 5 years prior in Davey in Ring of Honor as world champion, I feel like he could have been the guy to really bring TNA out of this era, or Eddie Edwards, because we both know that, Eddie's fantastic. Davey's just as talented. In fact, Brian Danielson has already said once upon a time that Davey Richards was the most talented wrestler he's ever faced. I don't know if he'd still agree with that sentiment, 10 years later, 15 years later, but at a time, Davey was every bit the respected grappler that Brian was. So I'm not a big fan of them going with EC3 over Davey Richards. You could have done it in the finals. I think that's fine. But I think a second round elimination isn't exactly great. Do you think Davey should have been further down in the tournament, or do you think because he wasn't a great promo and didn't have a great character, this was a fair place to have him get bounced?
I think it was I think it was fair because they were still teaming heavily back at that time, right?
Yeah, Davey and Eddie were still a team at the time.
Yeah, so I think that was a fair spot to get bounced. We didn't really get nothing on a single level for him for some years later, and it wasn't necessarily that good, but it was better than we had. And it was cool to see them come back together in that capacity at least. But I think that might have been fair. Like you said, they both really talented and whatever. But I think in the long run, specifically what we ended up getting, what we still have, I think Eddie was the right in that regard.
I agree. I think there's value to that. Next up, Lashley defeats Mahabali in the second round. Um, I would have preferred it be Eli and Lashley. Lashley's one of those names, especially
Yeah.
in 2015. I think he would be like 38. I think now you're starting to see that he's slower. He doesn't have the same pop he once had, which is why he's in a tag team with an equally 50-year-old Shelton Benjamin. But then he was still in phenomenal peak condition. Still looks great, but he moves differently because he's 50. Now, at 40, 38, 39, what have you, he was not wrestling all the time. He left the WWE in 2008, popped up for a brief spell in 2009, had a few matches, left again. came back in 2014 as a member of the BDC, and yeah, he was doing MMA at the time, but he wasn't beating his body up like you would be if you were doing 200 matches a year. So he was still in really good condition. Physically, he could still move really well. So I don't have a problem with him going over on Mahabali or Eli Drake in this regard. But again, I think you fix the things where if he loses to Lashley in the second round, or specifically in the third round, you do it so that he's not having to face Lashley early, and Eli gets a stronger run, and you could have EC3, Lashley, Eli, and Davey Richards, or Ethan and Lashley and Eddie and Davey, or any combination of those five. I think those five is the final four, best case scenario. But I don't like that they kind of shoehorned him into the Lashley's EC3 spot in the next round, because I feel like you had the chance to really have a big final, and they opted not to do it, which I know would have been a big final because this would have been the main event in 2016 at Bound for Glory, EC3 versus Lashley. Lashley, I think, is the defending champion at the time. EC3 is the challenger trying to get his belt back. So clearly, TNA had faith in them as a headlining duo. So to not have them face off in the finals again, missing opportunity. And then on the other side, Eric Young defeated Tigray, and Matt Hardy defeated Jesse Goddard. Um, I feel like the top end of this tournament, Marcus, correct me if you don't agree, filled with potential. EC3, Davey Richard, Bobby Lashley, Eli Drake. Bottom half, no one. I don't think any one of these dudes should have been a world champion or in the world title tournament finals. Least of all, Matt Hardy. This is the if you've ever heard of the New York Yankees in the 1920s and 30s, they were called the Murderers Row because facing each player was like facing a murderer. They would destroy you, and you had to face nine of them. And I feel like this is bitches row. Matt Hardy faced a bunch of bitches. Bobby Roode, sure. I think he would even win the world title again sometime in 2016, briefly. But for the most part, Tigray, bitch. Eric, bitch. Goddard's, bitch. The ladies, they're not bitches, but they weren't a strong out. Kenny King, bitch. So, like, top half God tier, bottom half bitch tier. This brings up the
No, you're
final,
right. And even yeah, even if they were touted to be, they didn't book them like that. So
right? This brings up the final four of EC3, Lashley, Eric Young, Matt Hardy. There's some serious issues here. One, I don't get Eric Young at all. Don't get him now. Didn't get him when he came back. Definitely didn't like the fact that he beat Eddie for the title. Don't like that he was insanity. Don't like that he was, being seen as like a world title contender in NXT and then possibly on SmackDown, and how many people kissed his rosy red ass. Like, Jesus Christ, Eric Young's not a good athlete. He's not a good worker. He had 1/7 month stint, if you will, in 2006 when he was Don't Fire Eric. He dyed his hair black. He tried to be incognito. Him being a goof, that's where he shines. He was funny in 2014 when they were doing the TV title stuff, where he jumped out of a tree and beat up Scott Baio. That was hilarious. He was cool with Super Eric stuff, but like that was his. That was his. Like that's what he did well. When they tried to make him the super serious evil cult guy, or I'm a badass biker guy with a beard, or I like records, which weirdest little thing about Eric Young I know about him. He hosted a show on Access, basically where he talks about records. So there's that. Um, I
yeah,
I don't know who Eric Young has given fellatio to. He's hosted
oh
3 or 4 shows, and I don't know why.
yeah. I was I was gonna ask you real quick because the way you were describing him, who would you compare him with the same way you feel about him in WWE with those
Currently,
same feelings?
or historically.
It's historically because he's been there long enough. for you to make a historic pick.
All right. So if I had to pick a guy who was severely out of his station for most of his career and got a run after run after run, even though his mentality, athleticism, and overall gimmick wouldn't really subscribe to that,
Something that just got hard on for it.
right? Here's the thing, like I think the closest guy in terms of just an absolute hard on for who does not move the needle, who is just there because he's buddies with people, would probably be Randy Orton. But Randy Orton's not a perfect 1-to-1. Randy Orton's not a merch mover. He's not a ticket seller. He's a legend that people are like, oh, he's a legend, but then no one actually talks about his matches or his promos or his feuds. He's just old and had one cool move once upon a time. But I think the closest historical comparison I can make, it's not a 1-to-1 with how he's used, but it's a 1-to-1 based off of how he should have been used and how this individual wasn't used because everyone knew who it was. It'd be Coco Beware.
Oh wow.
No one should have. Like, I like Coco. He seems like a cool cat. Plus, he's got a cockatoo, and I think he has a parrot too. That was an innuendo joke. It went over your head. I understand. Um, I do think it was a parrot though, or it may have been a cockatoo. They're not too far different. I think cockatoos have that little thing that pops up off the top of their heads. I could be mistaken. I don't know anything about birds. But like he was the Birdman. Like came down with the cool jacket and the bird and he did a little dance and it was a lot of fun. People loved him. He would never have been a world title champion. Never should have been. Someone on Twitter's like Christopher Daniels should have won the world title. No, the fuck he shouldn't have. Putting the world title on a guy does not mean that we love you. It means you can make matches, you can make money, you can make merch move. And because of those three things, we will put the world title on you because it is best for us and the best for the business. I've never really agreed with Vince Russo on many things, but I do agree that the world title and all titles are props. And props prop up the wrestlers. And you should put the world title on guys that make your product more interesting. Not because you're trying to quote unquote reward the guy. I've never believed in that. I think that's stupid. I think do what you've done with other groups and other championships, sure. Like when Tommy Dreamer won the Digital Media Championship. I thought that was a nice reward. Low tier title, nothing to write home about. Frankie's there with the international championship. Perfect. I don't believe that you give world title wins to guys just because you like them, right? There has to be an element within it. And I feel like Coco Beware, as popular as he was, never should have been a world champion. Eric Young, as goofy and lovable as he was for, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, never should have been a world champion. And TNA really made that a thing in 2014. And then they tried to make him into a villain in 2015, and it was awful, and he's still awful. He's one of the worst things going in TNA today. I fucking cannot stand him. But it'd be Coco Beware. It would actually be closer to Santino Marella if Santino Marella got turned serious and then won a world title. And that being said, I still would have preferred that because I remember going ape shit when I thought Santino Marella was about to win the Royal Rumble in what was that 2016. It should have
Yeah.
happened. It should have happened. Could you imagine the chaos that would have caused? Oh goodness. I digress, though. EC3 defeats Lashley in a 9-minute match. Eric Young loses to Matt Hardy in an 8-minute match. That sets up EC3 versus Matt Hardy, which I believe was the start of 2016. Yes, it was the first show of 2016. EC3 beats Matt Hardy for the world title 2016. Starts his second reign as champion. Um, all in all, this tournament did nothing. It did absolutely fucking nothing. No stars were made in this tournament. There was no defining match. There was no brand moment. No great promo. There was no Austin 316. There was no coronation of the next big thing. It was a tournament and, you know, series, if you will, to simply pad television time. And that's what it felt like. It didn't feel like we were watching something to behold. It didn't feel like we were watching the best of the Super Juniors or the World Tag League or even the Bound for Glory
Yeah,
series from 2011. It felt like they're like, this is the easiest way we can make television for the next, 20 episodes or so. Let's just go and do that. And that's how it felt. That's how it came across. That's why this tournament does not get talked about enough, or I should say at all, because it was done on the cheap and only to fill contractual obligations. There was no heart, no direction, no goal. And it proved it in the way it panned out because it's one of the weakest looking, poorest executed, uninteresting, and unoriginal tournaments I've ever seen. I might be too harsh on this. Marcus, do you think I'm being too harsh on this?
no, no. Like I said, it was Frankenstein, and if we try to do a full list of pros, it'll be cherry picking and almost come off as simping for the tournament. When, like you said, they did it the right way better. What it was in 2011 when they actually did the World Title Series.
The Bound for Glory
Uh,
series, yeah.
the World Title Series. So yeah, I mean, even hell, back when Styles won, they did it. They ran it back, and Styles won it in 2013. Uh,
Think
one of the
so.
last things he did. Yeah.
He won a
Bound for
tournament of
Glory Series.
something. Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
it
I
was the
don't know if it
Bound for
was.
Glory Series because he beat.
Was it the Bound for Glory series? Did they do it 3 years in a row?
One of, I, definitely was the Bound for Glory Series because he beat Magnus. And that was one of the last times he hit the spiral tap. Um, so yeah, like they did it better, and it's one of those things. Like I said, they uploaded all those episodes fully on YouTube. Because honestly, I mean, why wouldn't you? It's not like it was. Like I said, it was so Frankenstein. It's not like somebody, oh my God, we missed the line. There was nothing live about it, sir. Um, so it's just one of those things, man. That you kind of just had to be there in real time to experience it. Just listening to you go back through it, it's taking me back because a lot of that stuff I had forgot. Like the Matt Hardy of it all, um, the way that they did the brackets or the groupings of it all, um, and it's yeah, they really kind of got away with highway. They got away with highway robbery barely, and it's one of those things. Thankfully, they did still have EC3 who talking about it now. That definitely feels like his glory days. Um, even Rockstar Spud, I don't know what he's doing now. Is he back on the UK scene?
No, he's working with WWE behind the scenes.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, at least he's employed. Um, but yeah, it was a hell of a time, and I'm just thankful they got out of it because that was another one of those periods where every year TNA was supposed to go out of business, and they definitely pushed the pedal that year.
So you are right. Styles did in fact win the Bound for Glory series in 2013, which I didn't even know they did. Um,
Yeah.
let's see. We had 3 years, 4 years technically. 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2016. Bobby Roode won it the first time around. Jeff Hardy won it the second time around, and AJ Styles won it the third time around, while EC3 won it the fourth time around. So, but he technically just won a tournament, not a actual series. And he isn't, and I don't think anyone from that fourth one is included in the participants list. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's EC3 won a Bound for Glory series, and he beat LA Knight, Matt Hardy, and Mike Bennett to win it. Mike Bennett beat Jeff Hardy. Jesus, this must have been the end of Jeff Hardy's run in TNA. because EC3 beat Matt Hardy. So I will say this: EC3 has won two pretty prestigious tournaments in the span of a calendar year. So that ain't nothing. All in all, though, I do feel like 2015 is the worst year in TNA history, and it's hard to look at how this all went about and think that it was actually worth our time. It didn't help the product. It didn't make anything better. It just filled airtime, and when that's the only thing you can really say about a wrestling match or a wrestling angle, you're saying nothing about it. What's the difference between this and the XWF or WXF? I think it's the XWF promotion when Brian Knobbs and Jimmy Hart tried to create their own off-brand WCW in 2001. Not much. They're both syndicated, taped, canned stuff. The only difference is the XWF had Josh Matthews beating AJ Styles in a dark match. That's a fact. That's real. And the TNA World Title Series didn't have any cool facts. I think that's the only difference. I would like to see them do something like this again, though. Not to maybe this degree, and definitely not taped 20 weeks in advance. I think that's the issue. But something close to it, sure. I like tournaments. I like series. I think I'd appreciate the Bound for Glory series more, especially if it was done in less of a stretched, drawn out way. But, you know, that's a different conversation for a different time. Marks, any
Yeah,
final thoughts on the World Title Series or the Bound for Glory series?
yeah. World Title Series, they can. That's a memory that can stay in the past. The Bound for Glory Series actually like. They could bring that back. I was gonna ask you real quick, and maybe this could be for another show. If they had to bring back, they tried to do like um a callback and bring back one of they old concepts to spicing up the world title thing. Would you want the Bound for Glory series, King of the Mountain match for that title, or I guess 'cause I can't think of nothing else. One of the reverse battle royal for the title,
Ooh.
or the
Um,
number one determine the number one contender for that type of deal.
I think of them all,
Yeah,
I'm a sucker for the King of the Mountain match. I think it's so stupid and fun. And it's just a smodge podge of dumb stunts and moments that can happen from it. Um, as far as a angle that can last you a month or two, Bound for Glory series or
yeah.
the World Title Series for that matter. I think either or sets up a real fun, interesting month of television. But you have to do it over a month, maybe two. You can't just stockpile all the matches into 3 days worth of TV tapings, and you actually have to let things breathe. You do that, and hell, who knows? Who knows?
You, you have to put two names at least from NXT.
Unfortunately, now you do. Yeah, I do. What's his name? Dimes, Danny Dimes, D'Angelo Dimes, Dimes D'Angelo.
Tony D'Angelo
Sure, if that's his name.
and who and Oba.
No, I would pick I don't know someone from Dark State. Just I would have them just eat fucking losses. I would never do anything actually with NXT if I didn't have to. But if I have to, I'm gonna pick the worst goddamn wrestlers in existence, and I'm gonna have them just eat fucking losses after losses after fucking losses.
You know
So,
what'll be interesting because they or they have been so thinking about equaling out the things with the men and the women. Like I throw a nod to you and do the King of the Mountain for the world title
mm-hmm.
for the men, and maybe try a Bound for Glory series for the women.
Ooh, see, that's what I like. I like the idea of optimizing men and women on similar platforms but doing different things. I don't like the idea of the WWE Women's Intercontinental Title and the WWE Women's Royal Rumble and the WWE Women.
Mhm.
have them have their own things. It helps differentiate it because it doesn't feel like you're just giving them, like pity. They're not stars in their own industry when you have them basically do all the same things men do. So like let's say you get into
Yeah,
August. Okay, well what we're going to do is the Bound for Glory series for the women. But on the flip side, we're going to do the World Tag League for men, right? Or vice versa. You
yeah,
focus and feature both men and women in separate activities, but at the same idea. If you want to have separate titles and it's not separate titles, if you want to have secondary titles, freedom. I think TNA would do wise to have like a TNA television champ or TNA Knockouts television champion. There isn't one. There isn't a TNA television champion, or having the DMC title be exclusively a women's secondary title. I think these are ideas that could work, or having naming the title after a defunct company, like like Rise, call it the Knockouts Rise Championship, and it can only be defended by or won and defended by women who have never won the world title, the Knockouts World Title. Come up with a trios tournament for knockouts and have them defend instead of having the knockout tag team titles, you have the knockouts trios titles. Just find ways of optimizing and differentiating both the men and the women so that they both have their own vibe. Because I feel like
yeah,
that's part of the issue with wrestling right now is that the WWE specifically is just trying to have the same storylines, the same matches, the same title belts, the same title designs, the same everything for men and women. And it has oversaturated, it has severely depressed, and has basically made fundamental moments no longer momental. Like the momentousness of some of these moments. Two WrestleMania main events in a single year. Who the I no longer care. It's not special anymore. Two Royal Rumble matches on the same night. It's not special anymore. So yeah, I would avoid doing that. I would avoid having the women and men do the same type of thing, and I would have them do different things because then that way things stay fresh, they stay unique, they stay original, and they both can have their own developing kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Not banner. Um, I can't think of the word. Brand. There we go. You have your own unique and individual brand, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Marcus, I think we should talk about wrestling next week. We had an idea. Oh yeah, Global
indeed.
Force Wrestling. We're going to talk about the Global Force takeover of 2015. Not the takeover. The takeover happened in 2017. We're going to talk about the Global Force Wrestling invasion of 2015. What do you think about that? You gonna be
All
ready?
right.
What I'm gonna need you to do?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
I'm gonna need you to read up on them. I'm gonna need you to read up on the television tapings. I'm gonna need you to read up on the New Japan Wrestle Kingdom show they produced. I'm gonna need you to read up on the talents, the history. We're gonna focus mostly on the invasion and the uh, uh, episodes of Impact that featured them. We're not gonna talk about the actual Global Force Wrestling episodes. We're just going to look at the Global Force Wrestling takeover episodes of Impact. But we are going to talk about the
gotcha.
broader aspect of Global Force Wrestling as well. So that's going to be next week's show. Global Force Wrestling invades TNA, the Wrestling Underground
Gotcha.
podcast. So for Marcus Green, I'm Chad Porto. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for giving us a chance. If you want to follow us, you can do so over at WrestlingUnderground.com. Nope, that's incorrect. It's RealNerdCorp.com. I lied. RealNerdCorp.com. You can find us on Twitch and YouTube at WrestlingUnderground.com. We are on our personals. Marcus, you can be found on Paradox Kid, ParadoxKid.
That's me.
You also have another podcast, The True Penny Show. What's coming up on The True Penny Show this week, Marcus?
Coop in the show of the weekend will be doing bit of a retrospective of lifetimes and some matches of the great Stan Hansen.
Stan Hansen's one of my favorites. Dude was a hilariously brutal wrestler for All Japan. Choice pick. Choice pick. You can find me on Twitter, Chad Nerdcorp, CHED, I'm also on the Instagram at Chad's Photo at CHDSPHOTOHUT. We're back next Tuesday. We may go live if we can get the bandwidth necessary to not drop out because this has been remarkably smooth for us. So, like, I dig that. But yeah, maybe we won't go live again. Maybe we'll just do a tape show because it seems like we're having less interference. I'm not having any clicks or glitches, and it sounds a lot better. It's not like we have a huge chat anyway. So hey, maybe we'll just do this going forward because it's worked real well. Um, so yeah, next week Global Force Wrestling. Check us out here on YouTube.com/Wrestling Underground. For Marcus, I'm Chad. That's it for us. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for giving us a chance. Remember, of course, to watch more wrestling. Marcus, take us home.
Good night.